Good morning, everyone. I assume it's morning for most of us where we are logged in from. My name is Rukmini Iyer, and I'm the convener for the Samvaad National Interfaith Summit. Thank you for joining us. And with me, of course, you see also my team on the screen. We have Sagar from Seeds of Peace, Urmi as well from Seeds of Peace. We also have Stefania and Pallavi, who are our outreach coordinators that a lot of you have been speaking with as well. And Soumya is helping us out as a volunteer. She is an alumnus of one of the Seeds of Peace programs. So thank you for joining in today. This is the first National Interfaith Summit that we are attempting under this generous grant from the US Consulate in Mumbai. And we also have representatives from the consulate here. So thank you for being with us. It is, as the convener of the summit, my pleasure and my honor to welcome our guests, our distinguished speakers. We'll get to introducing and speaking more about each of them as we go along. But welcome everyone and welcome all the participants as well. At the outset, on behalf of Seeds of Peace, I must place on record our gratitude to our grant sponsors, the US Consulate General Mumbai, for making the Samvaad project as well as the summit possible. The Samvaad project began early this year, in fact, January of 2021, under a grant from the consulate, and this grant enabled us to work with 30 university educators from 6 states in Western India. And we were part of a team that helped to train them as interfaith dialogue facilitators. So these educators went through several months of rigorous training and mentoring, and they went on to also facilitate interfaith dialogue in their institutions. And so the intention was to create this ripple effect amongst hundreds of young individuals. The summit that you are at now is a culmination of the Samvaad project. And our intention is to reach out nationally and internationally to make content related to interfaith work available and accessible to anyone who's interested in it. And so we bring you this summit with utmost humility, gratitude, and of course a prayer that this work reaches as many people as possible in the challenging times that we live in. As I proceed, I also want to acknowledge our partners without whose support this summit would not have been possible. And on behalf of Seeds of Peace, I wish to place on record our gratitude to our outreach partners, which includes Lead India, United Religions Initiative, People Tree, Oro University, Religion World, and Youth for Peace International. We also had great support from our friends and allies, including One Future Collective, Sadbhav, and Peaceworks, and our media partner is Shunyakal. So with that, let's get right on and dive into our schedule for this morning. We have from the US Consulate in Mumbai, Koyal, who's been our grant project associate and extremely helpful to us over the last 1 year. We also have Yoon Nam from the consulate, and let me take this opportunity now to introduce Scott Ticknor. On behalf of the US Consulate General Mumbai, we have Scott Ticknor, who is representing the Consul General David Rance today in this forum. Scott joined the consulate in Mumbai in September 2020. And before that, he was on detail to the Corporate Council on Africa as a senior advisor to the president, and also served as the acting special representative for commercial and business affairs in the State Department's Bureau of Economic and Business Affairs. Mr. Ticknor has been a recipient of several multiple Superior Honors Awards and the 2017 Foreign Policy Advisor of the Year Award. And with that, Mr. Ticknor, we request you to render the welcome address and formally begin the summit.
Thanks so much, Rukmini. and welcome everybody. Good morning, everybody. I think it's morning for everyone here. The U.S. consulate in Mumbai is really proud to sponsor the Samvaad National Interfaith Summit and to work alongside our friends at Seeds of Peace on the larger interfaith project, which everyone here has contributed. It's a pleasure and an honor really to be speaking with you today. I recognize that the participation in and organization of Samvaad has not been easy. What began as a hybrid online in-person program experienced several postponements and ultimately shifted to a fully digital platform due to COVID's second wave. I thank all the educators and all the students who have actively participated and contributed to the success of the program, despite the many disruptions brought about by the pandemic. You don't have to search very hard or flip through the news archives too far to find tragic incidents born of religious difference all around the world. Religion has tremendous power to inspire empathy, altruism, and peace. It's true. But all too often, religion is misused as a wedge to divide, marginalize, and debase the other, often with violent consequences for specific groups. In the last decade, we've seen religious tensions flare into violence across the globe, whether arising from power struggles between Sunni and Shia groups in the Middle East, persecution of Muslim Rohingyas in Myanmar, or the unspeakable oppression of Uyghurs at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. Across the world, including the United States and India, it seems like every day we read of incidents where hate speech, harassment, and violence are tied to religious identity. As in the United States, religious identity has played a significant role in India's political and social dynamics, at times fueling conflict and disrupting the peace and stability and growth of our two countries. We believe at the heart of such conflict is a lack of understanding and empathy towards those of different faiths. And so the U.S. Consulate and the Seeds of Peace have partnered to organize Project Samvaad, to raise awareness around religious diversity, to challenge biases, to promote peaceful conflict resolution. And by providing college lecturers and professors with interfaith dialogue facilitation skills, this year-long program has the potential to foster more profound understanding, tolerance, and inclusion among college students of different religions across Western India. I'd like to take a moment to talk to those college students today. In many ways, what makes our two countries unique is the breadth of our diversity. And what I say about America, I think holds equally true for India. Diversity comes with its challenges, but diversity is also a bounty and a core part of our national identities. We cannot stamp out our differences to produce one homogenized America or one homogenized Indian without also fundamentally diminishing our very character. In today's global economy, our ability to connect with and understand people from different backgrounds is immensely valuable. To leverage our national diversity as a strength, we must learn to overcome ignorance and skepticism of those with different identities. Whether based on geographic origin, language, religion, sexual orientation, gender, or ability, we need to do this through respectful dialogue. Every year, the United States State Department produces what we call the International Religious Freedom Report, which describes the status of religious freedom, government policies violating religious beliefs, the practices of groups, religious denomination, and individuals, and U.S. policies that promote religious freedom in nearly every country in the world. We in the embassy, the consulate here, contribute to that report. It's submitted to the U.S. Congress. It's on the internet. It's publicly available. It has wide global readership. And I encourage you as students and professors and practitioners, journalists, to read and use this report. The 2020 report is online, and hopefully it can be help in your in gathering information, in your advocacy, and promoting tolerance and interfaith harmony. This past week, President Biden hosted a two-day summit for democracy to introduce the United States' commitment to reinforce the United States' commitment to placing democracy and human rights at the center of our foreign policy. By convening over 100 countries, including India, the effort reflected our conviction that to tackle the world's most pressing challenges, democracies must come together, learn together, and act together. Among the summit's three pillars was to solicit innovation and bold commitments to promote respect for human rights, including religious freedom, both at home and abroad. I look forward to hearing what proposals will come out of the summit that offer the US and India a way to further promote religious freedom. America's partnership with India on religious coexistence is not confined to Samvaad or the summit. In India, the US Department of State launched the Kennedy Lugar Youth Exchange and Study Program, or YES program, in 2005. YES invites high school students from countries with significant Muslim populations to live and study in the United States for an academic year. To date, the program has been instrumental in connecting over 580 young Indians with the United States and promoting mutual understanding and respect. To promote the value of dialogue to overcome division, in 2018, the U.S. Consulate in Mumbai and Chennai invited Daryl Davis, an African-American lecturer and author who's well known for developing personal friendships with members of the Ku Klux Klan in the United States. He came to Mumbai, Ahmedabad, and Chennai, where he engaged local academics, NGO and community leaders, youth, and different strata of society and the media to share his story of confronting hatred and to discuss effective communication tools to counter intolerance and violent extremism. And turning to our co-sponsor in the United States' endeavor to promote cross-cultural understanding and garner positive community change, Seeds of Peace has been a long-standing and valued partner. Over the years, Seeds of Peace has collaborated with U.S. missions in multiple countries plagued with religious tension or having a religious tension in some form, including India, Pakistan, Jordan, and Israel, and helping reduce conflict by helping young people shift perspectives through transformative dialogue. I would like to thank Seeds of Peace's India Director, Sagar Gangurde, and his team, esteemed mentors, Rukmini Iyer and Mansi Pajwani, for your partnership. And finally, Executive Director of Seeds of Peace in New York, Father Joshua Thomas. This phenomenal project wouldn't have been possible without your support. Finally, I would like to congratulate the entire Samvaad team on the launch of this national summit, the announcement of the Samvaad Project Handbook, a repository of digital resources that will be a valuable toolkit for interfaith dialogue practitioners in India and beyond. On behalf of the United States, it's my immense honor to open the Samvaad National Interfaith Summit, and I look forward to a really wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ticknor. And as he mentioned, one of the outcomes of the Samvaad project and this National Interfaith Summit has been the Samvaad Handbook. And I request Urmi to share what it looks like. This handbook is intended as a comprehensive resource book, which publishes ideas that are useful for interfaith engagement in various contexts, particularly meant for educators. We're happy to release this as a digital resource that can be easily and freely downloaded and distributed across the world. For now, this is a preview that you see on the screen, and you will soon be able to download a copy of this handbook on our website and also receive it via email if you so choose. And for now, I'll post a link of the website on the chat box, and you will soon also, as we go along in the summit, you will also receive a way to get this handbook via email as well. So thank you, Urmi, for sharing that. And with that, let's go to our keynote address. We are honored to have the opening keynote address for the summit being rendered by Dr. Kaushiki. Dr. Kaushiki is a professor at the Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution at Jamia Millia Islamia in Delhi. She's been a faculty at the Nelson Mandela Center since July of 2004, and she holds a PhD and master's degree in political science from the Banaras Hindu University. And her doctoral thesis was around refugee problematic and regional security in South Asia. And she's been a Fulbright scholar. She's got several academic honors and achievements. And she has pursued her interest in education for peace through several trainings and workshops beyond the academia. She's also been credited with creating 2 training manuals, lectures, presentations, and several papers and publications as well. For today, she's going to address us, and the address is titled Life Ways and Living Together, a peace-building perspective on interfaith dialogue. So over to you, Dr. Kaushiki.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here. Am I audible, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here. For the talk, I'm going to be sharing my screen actually. So here it is. Is it visible? No.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm more used to Google.
No
Google
problem, ma'am.
Meet. So I
If
think
you could perhaps
I'll
start
just
talking. If you like, you can email us and we can share it on your behalf as well.
Yes, yes. Okay. Okay, so as has already been said, I'm going to be talking about life, ways, and living together, and it's a peace-building perspective on interfaith dialogue. I have titled it Life, Ways, and Living Together, and the idea being that when Seeds of Peace approached me, inputs were more on about how there are different ways of looking at faith itself. And that is why I chose the term life ways. So my talk would be centered on 5 different aspects. So it will be touching upon 5 aspects actually. The first that I'm going to be talking about is life ways and living together itself a little bit. Then I'll be talking a little bit about dialogue and interfaith dialogue. The third I'm talking about is dialogue in the context of peace building. Fourth, then I'll be touching upon a little bit on conditions in which dialogue is not really useful. And lastly, then some concluding thoughts. So coming to the first part, life ways and living together. So the moment we say life ways, I simply mean ways of life, okay? And I really want to stress on the S part of it, okay? So I'm not saying way of life, I'm saying ways of life. Patterns of life, it's different manners of living. And this life way is therefore connected and linked to value systems. These would also include customs, habits, meanings. And this is a term that is largely used in the discipline of anthropology and sociology, but has become more common these days in other disciplines as well. Also, we can link the term life ways to worldviews itself. So, different ways of looking at the world is what I mean when I say life ways. So that was a little bit about talking about how life ways and living together. Life ways actually. Coming next to the point about living together. So therefore, in a world where there is so much of diversity, there is so much of difference, we are different from each other in many different ways. No society is homogeneous today. So therefore, in that scenario, we are talking about living together as well. Then, so dialogue needs to be looked at a process that will deal with diversity, that will deal with differences. We see there's so much of diversity in human beings between on views, beliefs, attitudes, values. We can imagine a situation where we would all be the same, speaking the same kind of language, wearing the same kind of clothes, or eating the same kind of food. In many ways, that would be so very boring and unnatural. And that is not how the Creator created us, human beings like that. Even our 5 fingers are not the same. So therefore, diversity is a fact of life. Differences are a fact of life. It's a natural thing. Now, what do we do with these differences? What do we do with these diversities that are a normal thing? That is what will determine our quality of lives, the way we want to live with each other. So those diversities, those differences are going to determine the quality of our human lives. On one hand, we can choose to use those differences as dividing factors or as dividers. On the other hand, we can use those differences as bridges. So if we want to use those differences as bridges, then it will help us to enrich the human race. It will help us to bond with each other as human beings. And if we choose to go down that line, if we choose to go down that path, then we can use dialogue as a mechanism for peace building, as a mechanism for day-to-day interaction. The dialogical approach is something that can become a part of our lives. So there is no doubt that, dialogue is the need of the hour. Okay, we need more dialogue today rather than less dialogue. yes, differences are a fact of life, but we also have to live together. We cannot all the time choose whom we want to live. That may not be the case always in society. So therefore, we need more dialogue today rather than less. Secondly, in this, we are getting connected more and more virtually. But what we also need to realize is that less and less face-to-face interaction is happening, and that is so sad and unfortunate. Okay, so therefore we need more of dialogue in such kinds of scenarios where people are looking for instant gratification, whether it comes through social media or any other means, but therefore in such a scenario there dialogue is much more necessary. The face-to-face interaction is what I mean. Now, coming to the second part where I talk about dialogue, its meaning, what are some of its features, some of its principles and processes. So coming to the dialogue, the word dialogue itself, the origin of the word is from the Greek. I'm sure most of you know about it, but just to touch a little bit upon that, the origin of the word itself is from the Greek word dialogos. Okay, dia means through and logos means word. So simply meaning through the meaning of words. So it is a communication basically that uses words to convey meaning. Conveying meanings, making meanings, these are very critical and intrinsic to dialogue. In any dialogue, you will see that participants end up co-creating meaning. So as human beings, that is also essential because we are meaning-making animals, okay? We have to make meaning out of what we are doing. When we don't end up making meaning out of things, or if things don't make meaning to us, then we end up traumatized. And that is what happens when, very violent conflicts take place. So therefore, as human beings, meaning making is something that is intrinsic to us. And that is something that you will see also playing out in dialogue situations. When Plato used the term, dialogue in Socratic dialogues, he was basically describing it as a process that would be used for deriving the truth. But how? Through a logical sequence of inquiry and response. So he used it in that sense. We today use it, more simply speaking, as a form of communication, but not just any form of communication. It must have a purpose. It must have some sort of meaning making that must be going on in that dialogue. So dialogue, therefore, is a communication, but it's a different kind of a communication. Any verbal exchange you cannot call a dialogue. As I said, it needs to have a purpose. It also needs to be face-to-face. Yes, with technology today, we can do dialogue through the use of technology, but face-to-face is the best. You see, what happens is that you're not able to see many times the non-verbal aspect of it, which is also very crucial aspect of any communication. The body language, the non-verbal gestures, the eye contact. All of that is also essential. The humane aspect you are able to touch when you do the face-to-face interaction. So dialogue is a communication, but it aims to build relationships. And that is the key aspect. So it's not just any form of discussion, but it's a form of communication that will lead to relationship building. In most dialogues, yes, information sharing is essential, perspective sharing is essential, experiences are shared, all of that are intrinsic to the process of dialogue. Another thing that we need to understand is that, when we see dialogue, we also need to sometimes talk about how to contrast it with debate. In debate, we tend to get rhetorical, we tend to get repetitive, we tend to get entrenched. The idea is I want to win this for myself, and you start playing it almost like a game. That is not the idea in dialogue, okay? There in dialogue, we need to approach it as a process of discovery, as a process of inquiry. But a genuine sort of inquiry. It's not just, it's not just where I have to win this for myself or I have to win this for my community. It's, I'm here to understand you, and I'm genuinely here to understand you. That should be the idea in dialogue. Many experts have gone on to talk about dialogue being a very, very unique process. And there are two reasons for that make dialogue essentially unique. One, that it's a guided process, okay? So therefore, we need a facilitator. It is usually guided by a facilitator, and the facilitator therefore plays a very, very important role in dialogue. Yes, dialogues can be unfacilitated also, but it's better that if you have a facilitator. The facilitator should be more responsible for the process rather than for the end itself, So a pure facilitator would never be responsible for the outcome. He or she is more interested in the process rather than the outcome. Yes, he or she can have the outcome at the back of the mind where he or she wants to take the whole process, but the time that the participants take, the discussion that happens between them, all of them, that is a time-taking process. And the facilitator plays a very, very important role over there. The second thing that makes dialogue a unique process is that the intention is to learn. Okay, as I said, it's about learning. And when you learn, you're bound to change. Okay, that gives goosebumps to some people. They are like, no, how can I change? How can I have good feelings about the other? And then, they start resisting that change in themselves. This is not, it is bound. If you are learning something new, then change is bound to happen. So therefore, you have to be open to that change. So the intention is, as I said earlier also, open discovery, genuine discovery. And when you do that, you're bound to learn new things. And when you're bound to learn new things, changes are bound to come within you and your thought process and your attitude. So those are the two things that make dialogue unique. Now, coming to the principles of dialogue, a couple of things that I want to talk about in the principles of dialogue. One is creation of a safe space. If you want a genuine dialogue to happen, you have to create a safe space. That safe space, when I say safe, it must be safe both psychologically as well as physically. So the participants who come to the dialogue, they must feel safe in both the manner. If they don't feel safe, they'll not talk. If they don't talk, the process doesn't work. If they don't feel safe, they'll not trust the process, they'll not talk, then the process doesn't work. So creation of a safe space is a very, very significant aspect of dialogue. Second is communication skills. In peace and conflict studies, we tend to talk about non-violent communication. So the communication has to be done non-violently, okay? And when we say communication, it has to include both verbal and non-verbal, as I said earlier, the body language. That is why the face-to-face interaction is important. And when you're communicating, you should talk about yourself. You see the usage of the eye language. Some people have to be coached into it. It doesn't come naturally to them. They will just immediately jump to we do this, and I have to sometimes tell my students, stop using the we. Are you the class representative? If you're not, don't use the term we. Just speak for yourself. Okay, so the I language is what then becomes important. So usage of appropriate communication skills is very, very important aspect of dialogue. In any dialogue, if you are going in with a genuine discovery idea, a genuine idea to discover, then it will surface things that are hidden, okay, things that are latent. And once they become open, then people start fearing, they fear that, Oh, am I revealing too much? How can I trust the other? Am I giving away my secrets? If I talk about my needs, will they be open to listening about it? So in any dialogue, what is hidden will slowly come out. It will surface, almost as if you're peeling onions. There are layers in any conflict. And if you have to reach the core, you have to peel those layers, just like you peel the onion. So therefore, what is hidden is bound to come up. And what are hidden? Beliefs, perceptions, stereotypes, those are sometimes that are hidden. And when that surfaces, people, that is a stage where people then want to back out of that whole process. They don't want to continue with the process, but it is very, very important to continue through that process. So stay through the hard places. That's my next principle. There are bound to be ups and downs in the process. When the downs come, don't back out. If you stick to the process, one of my professors used to say, the process will give you the results. So stick to the process, and that is very, very important. Then focus on the relationship. See, in any dialogue, if you come to this understanding that you don't want any relationship in the future, then the dialogue can proceed in one manner. But if you know that you cannot remove somebody from the face of the earth, then the dialogue has to proceed in that manner, which means that the focus has to be on the relationship. What sort of a relationship, how you will work it out, all of that is something that can be part of the dialogue itself. But focusing on the relationship is essential. And as I already said earlier, you have to be willing to be changed by the experience. In any dialogue, if you continue and stick to the process, change is bound to come in. And when change comes in, you have to be open to that change. Some people start fearing that change, and they think that their own people will give up on them, and therefore they don't want to continue with that change. So that was a little bit about dialogue, and then the principles of dialogue. The next thing about dialogue that I want to touch upon is that in any process of dialogue, you will see that there are three things that are very, very essential. So from the point of planning also, if you are organizing a dialogue, your dialogue should actually touch upon these three aspects. One is intellect, the other is emotions, and the third is the spirit. What do I mean by intellect is, see, there are differences and diversities. And when you are in any dialogue, what you see is the worldview of the other. So intellect is about that, recognizing that there are alternate viewpoints, recognizing that people understand the world in different ways. So it touches upon your intellect. Your horizons get expanded when you are in a dialogue. So intellect is the first aspect. Second is the emotions. The emotions in any dialogue, if you go deeper down, emotions are going to be stirred, no doubt about that, okay? But then if you stick to the process, it will lead to empathy, it will lead first to understanding and then to empathy, and then possibly you can try to act on the desired change that you want to arrive at in the future. And thirdly, spirit. The spirit is essentially about the human connectedness, okay? The core humane, the human being that we all are. So it touches upon the humane side. It inculcates it inculcates the care for other human beings. So the human connectedness is what I'm mentioning when I'm talking about the spirit part of it. Now I come to the third section where I talk a little bit about dialogue, interfaith dialogue, and peace building. So a little bit about peace building first. What do I mean by that? Yes, different people may understand it in different ways, but I'm using it very, very, very liberally in a very broad manner. And I'm here also using dialogue and interfaith dialogue interchangeably, the way Seeds of Peace uses it in a very broad manner. So peace building is addressing the causes of the conflict, the grievances of the past, as well as to talk about the future. The long-term justice, reconciliation is an important aspect. Also, when we talk about peace building, it involves all levels of society. It increases the capacity of individuals, so capacity building is very, very intrinsic to peace building. It involves short-term analysis as well as long-term. So in the short term, we want to deal with the immediate crisis, but it also helps you to think of the long term in talking about where do you want to take your society. Also, it is not really concerned about just the behavior. Peace building is essentially concerned more about attitudes and the context. So if you are working on peace building, whichever area you touch, you will ultimately end up influencing the context as well as the attitude. Peace building sometimes proves to be boring work for some people. Why? Because it's a low profile work. Okay, it's not high profile like peacemaking. You get all the attention when you're into peacemaking, but peace building is a low profile work, so it doesn't many times attract the kind of attention that it should, which can be both good as well as bad. Also, in peace building, there can be specific outcomes, but it's more about the process actually. So peace building and a dialogue are essentially intrinsically very, very linked to each other, because sticking to the process is important. Peace building, in most peace building efforts that have been undertaken in contemporary societies, like whether you see South Africa, Northern Ireland, Israel, Palestine, the process of dialogue was used at some stage or the other, okay? And dialogue, when we talk about dialogue, then it's not something in peace building, we don't use it at the top level. It's something that we use more at the grassroots and the middle level. And it's more effective over there, okay? And when you talk about the stage where it is most effective, it works good when you use it in the initial stages of the conflict and when you use it at the later stages of the conflict. So when it comes to peacemaking, dialogue may not be very effective, but in most contemporary conflicts that I gave the example just now, what we have seen is that the process was initiated as a dialogue, and then the top level took over, and then they indulged in peacemaking efforts. In any peacemaking, in any peace building initiative, you will see that reconciliation is inherent over there. And reconciliation is about addressing the past without getting into the blame game and moving towards the future. People also need to talk about their loss, their pain, their trauma, their fears, their needs. And in all of this, therefore, dialogue fits very well, okay? If you want to move towards reconciliation, then again, dialogue is effective. So as I said, in the initial process, a dialogue is effective in peace building. Again, even peace building, if you want to move towards reconciliation, dialogue is again very effective. So dialogue may not be the only mechanism, but most experts agree that it is a very essential one. In any dialogue, in peace building especially, trust is important. Also, patience is important. So if you're not patient in a dialogue, and if you don't give time to trust building, the dialogue may not give you the desired results, or at least not in the time that you wanted to give the desired result. Also, in any dialogue, you will see that acknowledgement and recognition are a part of the process. Okay, you at some point of time, you will do these two things, acknowledging the other as well as recognizing the other. Now I come to the, in mainstream education, if you see, most of my work is in peace education. So I did some bit of work in Kashmir, some bit of work in Manipur, and then in a few other places. And in most of these work, what I realized is that because it was mostly centered around workshops where the dialogical mode was followed, and we tried to be inclusive as far as possible. We gave space to people to understand understand them, to know their human side. And that is what then, gave the desired results. And therefore, so in any mainstream education also, whether it is school education or higher education, we need to give space to that understanding. It takes time, yes. Schools don't have time, which is sad. Most of the time they are burdened by curriculums and so on, and teachers are burdened by that. But then it's a time-taking activity. So in mainstream education, we need to make the space for dialogue. We need to make the space for interfaith dialogue, essentially. In his book Revenge and Reconciliation, Rajmohan Gandhi, he talks about South Asia, but towards the end of the book, he emphasizes on the importance of dialogue. And he says that South Asia needs dialogue across various divides. And that's what he uses, the term, across numerous divides. He says that in any dialogue, listening is essential. And he also talks about how you need to hear, not just from the ear, but also from the heart. So hearing not just what is being said, but what is also remaining unsaid. The second thing that he emphasizes over there is acceptance, which I have already, talked about earlier, that acknowledgement or acceptance is important. He says that most of the time there is no alternative to accepting those next to us or opposite us. We need not accept all their views or agree with their views, but we need to accept their presence. We need to acknowledge their presence. The third thing that he talks about in the context of dialogue is that he says that we need to use we need to avoid as far as possible the we and the they discourse, the othering, the dehumanization that happens. And therefore, I've already mentioned to you earlier about the usage of the I language. Coming to the last part then, when is dialogue, not effective? Sorry, this is the fourth part. When is dialogue not effective? So don't think of dialogue as a panacea for all the ills of the world, okay? It's not a cure for everything. As facilitators, as organizers, we must know when is dialogue not useful. There are certain conditions in which it is not useful. One, if there are there are same kind of people, if there's homogeneity in the room, if diverse experiences and views are not available, then there is no point in using the mechanism of dialogue. If immediate decisions are to be made, again, don't use dialogue, because dialogue takes time, okay? So immediate decisions, dialogue doesn't work. If the power balance between the participants is not equal, again, don't use dialogue. So for instance, dialogue should never be used in a domestic violence situation, okay, where the power is unbalanced. So use it only in situations where the power is balanced. Also, participants who do not belong to the same class or the same educational levels, again, it may not work, because those who do not belong to a certain kind of educational level, they may feel that they don't have the right language or the right kind of words to talk about things that others are talking. So they will not talk. And if they don't talk, then again, it doesn't work. You see, so participants, if they are not belonging to the same class or same educational levels, again, it may not work very well. Now, coming to the last part, therefore, just some concluding thoughts on dialogue. So one, it's a mechanism to build relationships, and that is how we should look at it. Two, face-to-face interaction is the best. But I do understand that, technology can also be useful. I did attend a dialogue in the wake of 9/11, where decisions had to be made in the US. Coincidentally, I was there. Decisions had to be made. One, if something needed to be built in the place of the Twin Towers, and two, what should that be? And it was all done through the use of technology. So, literally there were more than 1,000 people sitting in one room, and yet we could do that. So yes, technology can be used, but face-to-face interaction, I still feel, after being in service for 17 years or so and doing this, that face-to-face works best. There is a lot of scope for use of, dialogue is one process which gives you time and space to use narratives. Yes, it can be, it can go both ways. It can boomerang, it can work well for you, but narratives is something that nobody can, your personal stories, your narratives is something that nobody can say that, oh, this is not our experience. Fine, but this is my experience. You cannot deny my experience. So it values both facts, but it also values personal experiences and narratives. Also, dialogue, is something that where you can make use of collective wisdom. The things that are being said collectively, you can make use of that. Galtung used to talk about it. Galtung, who is the father of peace and conflict studies, he used to talk about, and it was one of his favorite expressions, where he would say that as a human society, we need to move from a culture of violence to a culture of dialogue. So that is what I'm talking about, moving from a culture of violence, using more and more the dialogical approach in things that we do on a day-to-day basis, in everyday life, in everyday activities. I do understand that exploring similarities and differences are a part of dialogue, but it has to be treaded very, very cautiously. I was once in a workshop where Indian and Pakistani youth were both interacting, and it started off like this. It was like, oh, such nice clothes, we have this movie, we have this actor, we have these actresses, this song. So it was all about, the cultural bonding was going on. And then suddenly one of the Pakistani participants said, hang on, we are not the same, we are different. So therefore, this is something that has to be treated very, very cautiously. Okay, it can work both ways. It can give you the desired results, but it can also, therefore, boomerang. So it has to be treated cautiously. So yes, we need more dialogue today rather than less. And to conclude, I would just end with this, that in dialogue, so this is a quote, in dialogue, the intention is not to discover, but to inquire, not to argue, but to explore, not to convince, but to discover. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kaushiki. I think you've set the perfect stage for the rest of our days. So thank you very much for this. We will move straight on to our panel discussion now. But before we do that, I do want to acknowledge that more people have joined us after Dr. Kaushiki began her keynote address. So welcome. Please do introduce yourself on chat. And from what I see on the chat right now, in terms of the experiences shared and the questions raised, there's very rich experience and interest in the peace building and dialogue space in this room. And thank you for coming together. And I hope we are able to also use this as an opportunity to network, connect with each other, and create collaborations going forward as well. So please do feel free to introduce yourself on chat. If you're comfortable, leave your email IDs so that people can connect with you. And let's see what emerges from this collective space that we have here. And Dr. Kaushiki, there's also a request from one of our participants around if it's okay for you to share your PowerPoint presentation. If you're okay with that, you could email it to me and we'll organize for it to go.
Yes, definitely, I will. I'm sorry it didn't work because
No
as
problem.
I said, I'm not very comfortable with Zoom. Okay.
No problem.
I will.
So much. Yeah. All right, so let's now dive into the next piece of this morning, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague Urmi. Urmi Chanda is a key team member of the Samvaad project, And she is an interfaith scholar. She is a professional doctoral candidate currently at the University of Wales, Trinity St. David in Lampeter, UK. And when she's not busy juggling multiple things, including her nonprofit work, her academic work, she also freelances as a writer, and she writes about culture, religion, art, and literature. And today she is moderating a panel discussion that now follows with three amazing panelists that she will introduce. And the title of the panel is Women's Agency in Interfaith Engagement. So over to you, Urmi.
Thanks, Rukmini, and good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be here today in such august company. And on behalf of Seeds of Peace India, I take this opportunity to extend a special welcome and gratitude to our panelists for the day, where, as Rukmini said, we will be discussing women's agency in interfaith engagement. One of the comments that I saw from David was about power equations, and in the realm of religion, especially, there's a huge disbalance when it comes to gender, which is why we felt, dedicating a session to this gender angle was important. So I have with me today Padma Shri Saeeda Hamid, founder and trustee of the Women's Initiative for Peace in South Asia and the Center for Dialogue and Reconciliation. Ashoka Fellow and renowned peacemaker, Madam Sushobha Barve, and educationist and social activist, Professor Joan Rebello. Currently an executive member of the Goa unit of the National Confederation of Human Rights Organizations, chairperson of Vikalp Outreach Program for Disadvantaged Women and Children, and a member of the Goa State Commission for the Protection of Child Rights, among others. Rukmini will be sharing their bios, more detailed bios on chat. I would like to start this panel today by inviting each of our panelists to briefly share the nature of their work and how it connects or can help women's agency in the interfaith sphere. My only request to each panelist is to keep their opening remarks to about 5 minutes, and I seek their pardon if I have to interrupt them as the timekeeper. So let's start with the person whose work is most connected to the theme of the summit. Ma'am Saeeda, could you go first to tell us what you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Urmi. We've been talking about this. Let me at the very beginning say that, the time is so limited. So please do something, wave your hand or something, because the subject is so fascinating and one can really, go over time. So having said that, first, I want to, congratulate and give my compliments to the U.S. Consulate for thinking of this whole program project and now the summit for Seeds of Peace, which I love that name. I just love it, Seeds of Peace, because this is what at least the three panelists. One of them is a very old friend, and the other one I've just met, but our life has been spent, and that's how you introduced us. So I guess that part of our life you have already highlighted. Okay, so let me at the beginning say that interfaith is not new in our context, in the context of the subcontinent. There's a terminology called manazra. It's an Arabic word, but that is where people used to talk about, from my grandparents' generations, people used to talk Muslims with Hindus and Hindus with, the manazras used to go on, the dialogues used to always go on. I'm also I have spent a lot of my life dealing with translations of the Quran and writing on the Quran. So I feel the whole concept of interfaith is very integral to Islam, which is what I know most. But I think with my work in various aspects of life, my connection with all religions. In fact, when you say what I do, I think maybe I should just stick with that. This is the 21st year that Muslim Women's Forum completes 21 years in 2022. So what I'm trying to say is that Muslim Women's Forum, name is Muslim Women Forum, but it is about women across, across all religions. So interfaith has been very much a part of my life, as of the life of my two panelists. In particular, I can relate to what Shobha has done. So that is Muslim Women's Forum. In that context, we brought Muslim Women Forum in the year 2000 to give Muslim women an agency, but along with Muslim women, all disempowered, all marginalized women. Now, I quickly go on to what I'm engaged in now. What I'm engaged in now for the last 4 or 5 years is this across the country, hold workshops across the country on understanding Islam. Islam is the most misunderstood religion in the whole world globally. And for that, Muslims are squarely responsible. So the purpose, for example, Islam is a very gender sensitive religion, but it is regarded as the most gender, anti-gender, and the most misogynist religion. So that, to unravel the real Islam, to bring the real Islam, that is the purpose. And we have been holding these workshops across the country. We had invited, but now for the last 2 years, it's become virtual. And virtual, of course, has its advantages, as we all know. So at a time, we'll have 60 or 70 people from across. And then so that is one engagement. And now we have begun to make films on our work so that it can become, it can be globally, it can be available, much more accessible and much more available. And then I think the keynote speaker, Professor Kaushiki, talked about Pakistan, India. One of our major work is to, when we, in the year 2000, we took a women's bus of peace, totally self-funded. Everyone put their little money together. 43 women went across the border to Pakistan, and 2 bus loads of women. And these were all very well-known human rights personalities who came back talking of peace, women's agency in peace. So that is why I find this is a wonderful subject. It's a very good, a very good intervention. And I think I'll just stop at that, because as Urmi asks, more of our work will become unraveled, and I may have reached my 5-minute limit. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Can I invite Sushobha ma'am to go next and tell us a little more about her present work? She has a whole lifetime of work to speak about, but what is it that's most that you're doing currently, and how it connects to the interfaith aspect? Ma'am, you're muted. Could you please unmute yourself? Yeah, you can mute.
Yeah. Is it okay now?
Yes.
First of all, thank you, Rukmini and Urmi, for giving this opportunity. And I would also like to congratulate the American consulate. A Kashmiri friend of mine who's an American diplomat had asked me about a year ago if I had heard of Seeds of Peace. So I said I did. Have I participated in a program? I said no. So about a month ago, to be invited to be part of this virtual meeting, I was very happy. So I can now tell him, yes, I have participated. As Saida mentioned, I also wanted to mention that actually the idea of dialogue is not new to the South Asia. Even in ancient times, we know through many ancient books and scriptures that there used to be an assembly where people of all backgrounds sat together to discuss many issues, and often there were disagreements amongst them, but we never have heard in those descriptions that it ended in a fight or in a war. And women were participants in those, in those ancient dialogues. So the idea of women participating in dialogue is not new. Unfortunately, in the recent past, South Asia particularly has lost this whole idea of a dialogue and settling disputes through dialogue across communities, across nations. And we have so many multiple dialogues India has with its neighbors on various issues, from water to environment to political issues to not having settled the borders and so on and so forth. But also within our own country, whether it is northeast of India or whether it is Jammu Kashmir or whether it is, various issues with tribals. Why are we not as a nation not being able to settle these disputes over river water sharing or the tribal issues or these political issues, bigger issues, within our own country, whether it is northeast or Jammu Kashmir. So that is something I feel very concerned about. But I'm also concerned about the issue of majority and minority, which I want to raise very, very strongly. Because my work of last 40 years has been centered around my own consciousness of a member of the majority community who has been so callous, either not thinking of the minorities earlier or being blind to how we have heard them, how the prejudices we have nursed within our own hearts. And unless these attitudes change, I'm afraid the path to peace is not going to move forward. So that for me has been very important. Change of attitude within my own self. First, that happened many years ago, more than 50 years ago, towards towards a Muslim classmate, Abida, who's today one of my staunchest supporter of the work I do in Jammu Kashmir. She lives in America, but we are regularly in touch and she tries to give me whatever support I need. So I'm very grateful for that. But that would have not happened. It would have not helped me to do the reconciliation and peace building work if I had not had that personal experience of getting over the prejudice towards the Muslim community. Yeah. So I wanted to flag that issue. The second issue I also want to flag is that in conflict areas, but also in the aftermath of violence, because people have gone through so much suffering, both sides are much more perhaps willing, although they may be hesitant to enter into a dialogue, but are more willing because they want now peace. They want to, just get on with the normal life. They are far more willing to do this. But it's a challenge. In areas which have not seen violence, to have a dialogue between communities, whether they are religious communities or caste communities or other types of communities.
Sure.
And that's a challenge. And how do we
address that?
Address that? And can we, I personally don't like the interfaith dialogue title. I just feel dialogue is dialogue, and you may have dialogue across many different, people. And I found that actually having a dialogue on issues which are dividing our country is far more difficult with my own majority community rather than, with the minorities. So that's also a challenge. Why is it that we don't want to consider, we just feel it's okay. These are political issues. The politicians will settle it. Anyway, I probably finished 5 minutes. Is it? Yeah. So I want to stop here. But I wanted to flag these different types of dialogues and the difficulties and the hurdles. And I have found in my 40 years of this peace building and reconciliation work, that I've not had any difficulty getting women to come forward and do the dialogue. And some of them are, doing even better work here in Mumbai. In Bindi Bazar area, I have a friend called Yasmin Sheikh. She's an advocate. And what she has done, what she is doing is far better than I would have ever thought of when I was doing work in Moda committees.
We should definitely get case studies like that. Anyway, thank you so much, ma'am. Moving on to Joan, ma'am. Ma'am, could you tell us what you're doing in Goa right now? You have so many roles, you're associated with so many organizations, but what would you say is most relevant to the theme of this summit, and where you can connect back? I'll come for more layered questions in a little while, but just give us a brief introduction. You are muted, ma'am. Can you please unmute?
Sorry, that's my grandchildren here to assist me.
I know, that's okay. That's nice. Everyone's welcome to the forum. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Rukmani. Thank you, Urmi. And I must also thank Father Elvis for having put me into this panel. I feel like a midget compared to the two ladies who went before, because they've done such colossal work. As far as I'm concerned, I've been a teacher for the last 40 years, 36 years in a college, 4 in the south, and 32 years in Maragao, that's in Goa. Now, right through my teaching and my work, I have always had this penchant for the underprivileged, for people who are disadvantaged. So even in my teaching, I would spot people who needed extra help and do that kind of thing. But in the roles that I was given towards the middle of my career, maybe, I was assigned the role of professor for the NSS. You all know what the NSS is. And I thought this was one place where we could really impress upon students the need to reach out and touch lives of people who are disadvantaged. And as some of you said, it's very true that you would find a lot of these people amongst the minority communities. Now here in Goa, over the years, we have had migrants coming in. And the history of Goa is different from the history of the rest of India. So once liberation came in, you had people pouring in. They needed people. People here needed others to come here and do the jobs because there was a lot of development happening. And as a result, we have settlements, we have slums coming up. And these people, unfortunately, have been treated like the scum of the earth. So when I took on the NSS, I thought to myself, why not reach out to children, particularly, who don't see the portals of a school? Now, of course, with the Education Act, every child is supposed to be in school. But at that time, many children were laborers, child laborers, working or not attending any school for that matter. So what I did was I got the NSS students together, and with quite some effort, we managed to contact these children who used to sell, in Goa, it's called pothis, bags, the plastic bags are called pothis. So these children, many of them used to sell these plastic bags in the market, in the fish market. Fish is one of the staple diets of Goa. So I used to look at these children and wonder why they're not in school, or, feel that they were spending a big part of their lives in this place and being treated so shabbily. So we got these students, NSS students, together and started a literacy program for them. As I said, a lot of work went before that because the parents were suspicious of us. You won't believe they even thought we were getting these children to get to take their organs. So, yes, it went to that extent. But somehow we dispelled these fears. We got them together. And for 12 years while I was there, we had this literacy program for these children. And through the children, we also got to the parents. So for me, this was a very rewarding experience, not merely that we taught the children this, but we also, it was a very big learning process for the college students, because for them, they never had this kind of a contact. And once they touched their lives, they felt that they were so enriched. They learned so much. And for many of them, it is a continuing relationship. They still keep in touch. When I go to the market now, some of these children, we haven't done much academically for them. They didn't learn much, but academically, but there was a lot of bonding that happened. And today, many of these boys and girls who were there, girls, of course, are married off. The boys run shops of their own. They're in the market, they're selling vegetables. And when I go there, I get things cheaper, right? I get, not that I want it, but there's, but you can see so much of love and
gratefulness.
Lot of gratitude. Yeah. So that for me, it's not that I've done it only out of love for humanity, but, it's kept me going. And I must also share a very sad part of my life. I lost my eldest son at the age of 16. So this sustained me. It was not that I just went out. I'm sorry, but it sustained me. This was about 30 years ago. And I feel that I have more boys. So this is one thing that, has really added a lot of value to my life. Now, post-retirement, I retired 17 years ago. Post-retirement, also, I've aligned myself with the movements like this. Right now, my engagement is with the NCHRO Goa unit. And we've had a number of, seminars and things like that. One of them was the Women's Reservation Bill. And we're very happy that a number of young women are now coming up. We feel that, the old order must change. And, God fills himself with the younger people. And it's very heartening to see people coming, not the kind of numbers that we would expect, but we are having a lot of participation. This is another of my engagements. Now, I'm also very much connected with my church and, the church activities. So there again, we have started through my initiative, of course, the Women Connect group. Nothing much has happened there, but, we are connected, and slowly but surely, I'm sure this interfaith dialogue will come through. Besides this, we have also in the past, with networking with other groups, we've had, interfaith meetings. We've had large gatherings, and we've had people coming from the national scene, also coming and addressing, people like John Dayal and Swami Agnivesh, I remember, and a number of others would come and address the group. So this kind of thing does happen. I'm sorry, I'm not able to say much about my work, but it's a little hands-on. And it is local. It is local. Thank you.
Let me give you a more specific question. See, because with Vikalp and NCHRO, the work that you do, involves working with women and children a lot, and these happen to be among the two most vulnerable social groups. When it say comes to violence, whether direct, whether structural. All manner of violence. So do you think there's any direct correlation between the extent of violence that women and say children face in the country and the extent of peace that prevails in the country? I feel it's a strong indicator, of how a country or a society treats its women and children, and how that reflects back in society. So what do you think, what can we do, what more can we do to empower women to counter different kinds of violence, even religious for that matter, subjugation? We're not talking of direct violence, but there are many other forms of violence, imposed through, say, means of faith, using faith as, an excuse. So, what are the measures do you think we can take that will help make our country a safer place? Because it's with every passing year, it seems to be getting more and more communally charged. So at the level of work you do within the framework of organizations that you work with, what are those big or small steps that we can take to make it safer for women and children? And ultimately, create a more peaceful society.
Are you asking me that question?
Yes, ma'am.
See, I happen also to have some kind of rapport with a slum area close by. It's most of the domestic labor for this town comes from that slum area. Okay. Now, when I started meeting them, in fact, I'd done a survey of all the houses there, and we kind of we documented a whole lot of things, particularly with domestic workers. It was meant for the domestic workers because most of the women there worked with us. Now, over the years, I've seen a lot of difference. These women who were so abused in their own homes and even by their employers. Even we used to abuse them, try to give them the minimum wage, make them work longer hours. They didn't know their rights. But now I see that many of these women, they demand. They say, we work 1 hour, we get the salary. Okay. And they're able also to dictate terms to their men because many men are drinking. The men are abusing them. So, in a small way, we are trying to tell them that, look, now you are doing the thing. You are the breadwinner. So you call the shots. Right. And
right.
So these kind of things, for example, I don't know if I'm talking too much, but I had a woman working for me, 2 minutes, working for me for over 22 years. When she came to my place, she was all black and blue. The husband used to beat her up, and he wouldn't work, that kind of a thing. Now, one fine day, the man disappeared and she was sobbing for him. I said, why are you crying? It's good riddance. The man was, torturing you. Why did you want to live with a man like this? Over some time, she came to terms with it. We saw that her children were educated, and today one of her sons is in the Gulf. He is doing so well. And, sorry.
No, see, these little stories are inspiring. And yes, one of the ways of increasing women's agency is, of course, financial independence. That's pretty much at the root of a lot of power structures that, are created around society. So yes, that is one solution. Educating and empowering women financially ultimately gives them more voice, whether, in the matters of faith or anything else. And I now turn to Saida ma'am for this one. Since a woman is often the author of the religious culture of a home, we feel that engaging with women on the subject is particularly important. And like charity, interfaith harmony ought to begin at home. So do you think, engaging women can create this narrative shift in society? And you, especially as a Muslim woman, what do you feel about this? How does a Muslim woman assert more agency in this regard? Why is staying true to her faith? What would you tell the average practicing Muslim woman? Saida, you're muted. Please unmute yourself. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Urmi. First, let me just say that I share a lot with both Sushobha and Joan. Sushobha, because I'm a born Kashmiri, and being a Muslim woman, Sushobha and I, our hearts beat together. I don't even have to say anything more. I think Sushobha has said everything. As far as Joan is concerned, of course, I also grew up on NSS, and she started off with NSS. And also the fact that during my term as in the National Commission for Women, and then my 10 years in the Planning Commission, there is not a patch of this country that I have not actually set my foot on. And it was always the children, it was always the tribals, the women, the tribals, the Dalits, the minorities. It hardly made any difference to me what religion, what caste. It didn't make any difference to me whether it was honor killing. It was the same in various communities, and also across the border. That also in South Asia, women are killed for honor, and that is that is across. Now, you specifically asked about the agency of women and how can women, what can women do in this very important thing of peace building. So when we took the women's bus of peace to Pakistan, it was right at the time of Kargil, and we got heckled on the road, only 43 of us going. So at that time, we thought that and it's 21 years ago, when all of you must have been very, very small girls. At 21 years ago, we thought that these women will, it's the women's intervention in the peace process which is actually going to make the difference. Absolutely. So that is where we started. And also that is why understanding Islam, if we can, how can women become agents? Women can become agents through understanding a religion. For example, Islam, my religion, is supposed to be anti-women, it's supposed to be anti-gender, it's supposed to be violence, it's supposed to be, In every way, it's a religion that people think of as something, they identify it now with the Talibans in Afghanistan.
Right.
But it is even in today's newspaper, I read about a family in Kabul who have now, with the help of the gurdwaras, the gurdwara organizers, they have managed to find a safe passage to India. And the head of the family was actually killed during one attack on the gurdwaras, an Afghan Muslim man. And they say we owe everything to the Sikh community. It's in today's paper. So I'm just saying that this sort of knowledge of religion, and hence understanding Islam, is important, not just for, it's important across the board. It's extremely important for Muslims, because Muslims also don't understand Islam. They don't understand the genesis of Islam. They don't understand that the Prophet of Islam was actually one of the best feminists that I've ever read about. And the women of Islam who led from the front. Now, if, for example, women, you said in the conversations we had before today's meeting, the women who actually transmit this knowledge to the families, and that's where it's all anchored. Those women have to understand what it is, and give, once the understanding, once the coin drops, then the whole story is different. And I think the important thing you also said is that the purpose of this workshop and the purpose of Seeds for Peace is to tell educators and to inform educators, so when they go into their classrooms and they have a huge influence. So they can, they can set this, they can change we call it mahal. They can change that atmosphere. They have that agency. And women are best equipped to do that. And we have to continuously tell them, and I keep saying Islam, although, I was always taught to respect and to love all religions. That's what my elders taught me, and that's what my religion has taught me. And I'm very, very categorical about that. I love Sushobha and I love Joan. One is a Hindu, one is a Christian. For me, there is no difference. There is, and my Quran tells me that. So it's understanding the basis of the religion, which has now become a global threat, which I think is such a crucial part of what I'm doing. And I think whatever life I have left, I'm an elderly woman. This is my cause. This is for which that is why I was so happy to come to the Seeds of Peace, because I'd like these seeds to sprout and grow and become, a lush scenario for us to move into, our children and our grandchildren can move into a better world.
Absolutely, ma'am. Amen to that. And we wish there was more time, but I'll turn to Sushobha, ma'am, for the last question. I'm going to come to the point of disenfranchisement with her, because her personal methodology of peace work involves engagement with the larger systemic and structural matters. She contends that religious conflict is never just about religion, because she says poverty and inequity foment discontent, and from there stems conflict. Ma'am, could you connect this to the communal situation in Kashmir? Also in your work there, what steps have you taken to empower women caught in the crossfire? And what is their role in preventing violence that stems from poverty and religion? If you could quickly encapsulate this for us.
I started work 20 years ago in Jammu Kashmir, and it's been a continuous engagement till today.
Right.
I make visits practically every month for anything between 10 to 15 days or sometimes more. And I have worked in all the 3 provinces of the state, including areas which are very close to the LOC. Now, different regions have different, social, social dynamics. When Saida was also a member of our founding member of our organization, Center for Dialogue and Reconciliation, with which I work. We made the initial visits in 2001 and 2, and we met people, all people. There were women, there were men, there were professors, there were lawyers, there were journalists, all kinds of people, including some who were in the separatist movement. They may not have been leaders. So our thing was to try and understand what were people's own views about their own situation now. We didn't go in with any agenda. That we wanted to have a dialogue between communities, between this group and that group, nothing. We just went, and for almost first 2 years, we just listened to people. And through listening, we began to understand their own preoccupations and their own vision or their own longings for the future. And that's how things began to grow. We started with a dialogue with teachers and professors, and they were almost 50-50 in that particular group. And they were discussing about the difficulties they had dealing with the children, students in the classrooms, the anger and the sudden outbursts, and they didn't know how to handle it, and the lack of patience, etc. So we created, through their help, a manual for peace education curriculum, and we worked on it for 3 years. We for the middle school, high school teachers, we trained them. One of the most difficult dialogues with women I found was between the Kashmiri Hindus, who are called Kashmiri Pandits, and the Muslim women, Kashmiri Muslim women. During the course of the recent 3 decades of armed uprising, and following that, various other street protests and other things that have happened, both communities have developed their own narratives of different history and history of the past 100 years. And they are stuck in that recent history. And it was very difficult to get them to talk about the present and the future without them constantly going back to when the Pandits had to leave 20 years ago and, whatever. So anyway, we got through it. And I remember in our first such dialogue between the Kashmiri Hindu women and the Kashmiri Muslim women, one Hindu woman said, "I feel for my friends in this room." The dialogue was taking place in Srinagar. And I'm so happy to come here, and I want to offer my hand of, friendship and help to them for the suffering that it is causing. And there was an instant reaction around the room. How dare you say you have come to help us? For the worst period of that, that recent history, she said, we managed on our own. We went out of our homes to work. We did this, we did that, whereas you never asked then for the. So, but I'm coming to the present day. As you know, last month, there were killings of some prominent minority Pandit community members. And the evening, the first killing happened of a pharmacist, very well-known, very popular pharmacist. All his clientele were all Muslims, from Farooq Abdullah to, he had in fact been there just the previous evening to buy his own medicines from that shop. There was anger across the board. People were very angry that he was targeted by the militants. But as the evening wore on, that anger dissipated and something else had taken place. I had not noticed it. Recently, I was there because a prominent Kashmiri Pandit academic put it to me to do something about this distrust and the new phase that has come, between the two communities, and help. He said, this is now the test of your trust building work. You must do something about it. So 3 weeks later, I was in Jammu, and all the migrant Kashmiri Pandit employees had all gone back. So I was talking to them, I was meeting them. Why did you run away? Every time something happens, if you run away, how will you ever, actually go back and settle there? So then they told me the difficulties, that just 1/3 of the 4,000 who came back, who were employed, had government accommodation. The 3/4 of them did not have. They were living in private homes. And their host told them, things are difficult now. Please, you go to Jammu, come back when things become normal. And so I suddenly found a new dimension of the problem, that the hosts were worried, not just for them, but were also worried that they could also be targeted because they had kept for 4-5 years, Kashmiri Pandits in their homes and rented their house. So anyway, I went back, and then the question was, I had a meeting with the divisional commissioner and to try and figure out, what is the solution for the issue if they had to go back to work again. So a plan was worked out. So that was okay. Then I thought, I must find out what the Muslims feel. Do they feel happy about them returning, or what was it? And in one place, in South Kashmir, I met a group of young professionals. And they started talking about this issue. And one of them said, the pharmacist's daughter, there's a video, and she has put it on the YouTube. And in that video, she says, whereas we go to London to study, you pick up stones and guns. And they say, what does she mean by that? Do we not go also to London and New York and California to study? Are we not also experts in IT, as IT professionals, and have jobs in Western countries? And then they said they have four Kashmiris at a senior level in Biden administration. So I said, now look, you must be generous to her. She was saying something in the aftermath of her father's brutal killing, but how fair was it to her when these journalists put the mics in front of her and wanted her to comment? I don't think this was her natural thought out response. So, I kind of put a challenge to them. And of course, I knew the group, some in the group who had invited me for that, meeting with them. But as we proceeded, then I felt to ask them, okay, you have these feelings which are probably justified. And they said, this is the same old attitude of 100 years ago when the Kashmiri Pandits were far more educated and we were not. But they said things are different now. Why can't they look at us for what we are today? So I asked them, do you want these migrant employees to come back? Do you want those who never left Kashmir for last 30 years to remain here? So they were quite taken aback. I wanted them to think. I said, please think, because I don't want to be involved in the process of bringing these back, because some of you said, ye hamesha bhag jate. So they thought about it, and they said, no, of course we want them to come back. And then the whole thing of the dialogue changed, about the relationship between the two communities. So I'm just saying, it is not as simple as we really think. Absolutely. If we really want to get into a dialogue in the majority and the minority community, there it happens to be Kashmiri Pandits are the minority. In rest of India, Hindus are the majority. Right. How are we going to treat, other people, other group? So that's the we are dealing with right now in Kashmir. Yeah,
absolutely. No, I mean, I'm sure all of us here understand that dialogue is it's a time-consuming process, like Kaushiki ma'am said, and often the dynamic on ground is very different with with a lot of challenges. Theoretically, you may intend to do one thing, which is also why I suppose, spaces like these are important, because, one step at a time, we are trying to figure what can be done better. So what I hear from the panel today, is listening, like Saida ma'am said, is important. Really listening to, people who are not from our camps, or, whoever we perceive as the other. Then true understanding of one's own faith is important, because, unless you know the tenets, it's so easy to get carried away by only certain narratives, which may sound violent or extremist, but there is so much more to a faith. So whether it's for people in general, or women in particular, I think this faith education in itself is important. Listening is important. Financial power is important, because that gives agency in a patriarchal society, and a willingness to remove oneself from the narratives, like Sushobha ma'am just said, like the Kashmiri Pandits, they like to talk about the eviction 20 years ago, and constantly referring to the same injustices, and how the same thing that Hindus do about Muslims breaking temples, like God knows how many centuries ago. So a willingness to do all of these things, I think, is what is needed at the level of the family, at the level of the organization, to sort of slowly increase women's agency and interfaith engagement. And hopefully, when it all comes together, one family at a time, one woman at a time, it'll create this larger ripple effect, and make this society a better place. That's a lofty thought, but that's one we are aiming for. One step at a time, but we're at the end of our time for this panel. I wish there was more time to speak. We will now go into a small short break. We're running about 15 minutes late, so we can maybe, Rukmini, a break of about 15 minutes.
Yes, we will start the tracks as scheduled at 11:30, so we'll have a shorter break. However, please do stay on, everyone, and continue to use the chat for networking. Thank you, Sayeda ji, Sushobha ji, Ma'am Joan, for being on this panel. It was an absolute privilege having all of you here, and thanks, Urmi, for moderating this. I so wish we could continue this conversation, and I'm hoping the three of you are able to stay back for a while and also respond to any questions that might emerge for you on the chat. So if any of us have questions for any of the panelists, please do post it on the chat, and they might take it up while we continue on the break. So what follows next is that at 11:30, we will begin 3 simultaneous tracks. And one of these tracks is a paper presentation by Dr. Sangeeta Srivastava, who's going to be speaking about the relevance of Bhagavad Gita in today's life. There is simultaneously a workshop by Payal Gupta. Payal is one of our Samvaad participants who was trained as an interfaith dialogue facilitator earlier this year. She's going to be offering a workshop on stereotypes. And then we have short format talks. There are 5 talks running on one track, where the topics range from Dr. Syed Zafar Mahmood speaking about the preserved tablet, an Islamic view on interfaith affection. We have Siddhartha from People Tree speaking about interfaith dialogue and climate change. Girija Venkatesh, who provides us with a musical interlude and speaks about her journey in terms of connecting to faith through music. Jayesh Jain, who speak about science catching up with dialogue and faith, and Naveen Vasudevan, who will share with us about his experiment around what is termed as Purnam Cafe, which is around creating dialogic spaces. So we've got these 3 tracks running simultaneously, and you can choose which track you wish to attend. So we will open up the breakout rooms for the track at 11:20, which is 4 minutes from now. But in the meanwhile, please feel free to stay on, use the chat to network, and also ask any questions if you have of our panelists. Thank you so much. And of course, I must also apologize for the visual disruption that happened, we've taken care to remove the person from the meeting and ensure that they're unable to come back. There's a question on chat about, can we track hop? Well, you can, because participants are enabled to join whichever room they wish to. My request, however, is to try and stay on one track as far as possible, out of respect for the speaker and also so as to not disrupt their process, particularly in terms of paper presentation and workshops.